So this is the way that those go together. By the way, I find it interesting. We usually talk now about the prefrontal cortex. I might have said this before because I said it somewhere recently, that Dan Siegel says now neuroscience is narrowing in right here. There's
The thinking.
intense levels of neural activity right here. And that interests me because I'm very interested in the mystical tradition, and they talk about the third eye right here.
Interesting.
Yeah, I find that interesting. Because eventually spirituality and science will come together. I think the more science evolves, the more the claims of mystics of the past are actually affirmed.
Today, we're discussing with Garry why trauma recovery work matters and what happens when we don't do it. We're talking about our inner worlds. I'm going to have a little quick look at my notes because that's something that I sometimes need to do. We're looking at the facets of the self because understanding that will help us make sense of what happens to ourselves when we experience trauma, particularly developmental trauma. And we also need to understand what happens to the brain. And we're going to make sure that we include our takeaway activity by explaining how the meditations we've released will support you. And we're trying to keep these to around an hour. So, Garry, if I'm waffling on a bit or you're waffling on a bit, let's pull each other's selves in, huh? So I'm going to actually read the questions because that's better, I think. So starting from the start, a person is born, their body, mind, and spirit enter this plane. And then we have development. So what's happening over time for development? And then after that, we're looking at what that means in terms of when somebody has been through abuse. So can you explain a little bit about development?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So it's a good place to start. I mean, people have very different worldviews. So when we use language like, body, mind come into this plane, other people might have their own view of what that looks like. But I can work with your wording there. Um, and I think the way that helps me to frame what's going on with or without trauma, but different with trauma, is that we have three key faculties. I don't know if we've covered this before, and if so, you can just kind of roll me through it a little faster. But we have our thinking, which is located in the brain. We have our feelings or emotional life centered in the heart. At least this is how we designate them. And then we have our behaviors or actions, which are in the what we can call metabolic limb system, the legs and arms, it's our doing. Those are the three faculties of the psyche. So psychology is built around those. We're trying to work with the interactions of our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. Yes?
Yes.
Now there's an overlord or an overlady. There's a higher principle at work that holds those together. And that, I think it's much more common now than when I was younger to call that the self. And lots of modalities call that the self with a capital S. And I think they're referring to what you're talking about, some sort of transpersonal aspect of us that is perhaps more enduring than these faculties of our psyche. And so the word psyche is also, it's the same word as soul. So in that way, you use the word soul correctly.
To represent, like, as in the true self, the capital S self is the soul.
No,
I always get this muddled.
that's the spirit. That's how I differentiate, okay? So when we talk about the soul, we're talking about the psyche, and the three aspects of the psyche are thinking, feeling, and behaviors. But then there's another principle at work, and I think often people talk about there's like a conductor at work there that is organizing, directing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. That's that kind of a conductor, yes, not like a brass wire or something, copper wire.
That's what I first thought. I
Yeah.
drew a little diagram like it was a connecting, and then I was like, "No, he means that one."
Yeah. So, and
So because this is for some reason, I need to draw this on a diagram and actually get it clear in my head, because so I've got this muddled with us talking a few times. I think I'm starting to get it. Um, so I think what I struggle with is the soul and the spirit, and which one of those is the conductor.
The spirit is the conductor. And in my conception, at least, the spirit is eternal. So when you talk about coming into this plane, that
Yeah,
would be the spirit that comes into this
that's what I'm.
plane.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one way to draw it is like a stick person with a head, and put a heart in the middle, because it's just a stick. So you can put a heart in the middle, and the limbs. So head, heart, and limbs for behavior. And maybe putting a halo over it can represent the spirit.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very helpful.
Okay. You can put it on your fridge.
I
And
shall.
then you'll never forget again, assuming you go to your fridge enough.
I do go to my fridge, but there's an
Yes.
awful lot of things stuck on there.
Yes. Oh, I see.
So I'll go back to look at my question in a second, because we don't want to veer too far off. But I think one of the things that we'll be getting to in this session, when we're talking about internal family systems coming up shortly, is that, and I'll come back to make sure I've wrapped up that question. But I think what I'm wanting to get to in this session a little bit is about how we become fractured
Yeah.
and
So
experience. Yeah. So
that's where I was going. I'm just going slowly.
I'll be
And I must say, I have a cough, whether you edit it out or people just forgive me.
they will forgive you.
There we go. That it humanizes me, doesn't it? Not that I need
Yes,
humanizing,
it
but
does.
so when we're born, so neurobiology now can track us from the uterus, from the before we're born, the embryo, and there's lots of activity going on, and it is forming us, right? So neurobiology is talking about the nervous system, of which the brain is a part. So they can see how that's forming in utero, and they can follow up that formation, and they can look at how we are in different environments, what's firing and what's closing down as we progress or at any given moment. That's what neuroscience does for us now. So we have an understanding of trauma like we didn't used to have. So I'll introduce the trauma aspect of it shortly, but I'll tell you what the ideal in psychology. So psychology, and I'm not advocating for this, but psychology has right and wrong sorts of development, right? I don't toe that line, because when we talk about coming into this earthly plane, I'm sorry if I'm putting others off by saying that, but it's an
I think
analogy.
just let's just be real.
Yeah. When we do that, we come in for a purpose. And if we talk purpose, we can't say that happened, that wasn't purposeful. That just is illogical, right? Um, so we have to reckon with whatever befalls us in this life, positive or negative, is a part of the reason we came, because we come with purpose. And then our job, I think you will attest to this, is we are asked to continuously wake up, to become more conscious as life unfolds. So, the way that we're put together, so there is nature, that's what we're talking about, but there's also nurture. Those two both take place. Our nature unfolds over the first years of our life, and the way that it unfolds it's hard to use words that are not judgmental words, but I'll just say the way we unfold throughout those early years is through what's called co-regulation with our mother. I think we've used that term before, and I'm not being politically incorrect when I say mother, although it may be another consistently nurturing person, but primarily, just like Freud and his school always talked about the mother, not in necessarily positive ways, because the mother got the blame a lot in Freudian psychology.
Mm.
But that is the significant person that the child bonds with, generally speaking. So in the first years of life, we go from not having this business, those three aspects of the psyche, thinking, feeling, and willing, organized yet in us, because our brain hasn't finished forming, our heart hasn't finished forming as organs, as physical organs, which become receptors for those soul principles of thinking, feeling, and willing. So we have a physical brain and a physical heart and limbs, but they don't come in fully formed. And as they form, those faculties of the soul take form as well.
Yeah.
My thinking takes form as a child, my life of emotions take place as a child, and my behaviors, what they will become, happens as a child. So over those first few years in my co-regulation with my mother, that enables me to become who I am.
Yeah.
With those, if it doesn't, if it's not ideal according to Erik Erikson's child psychology, or in the ideal, some people do okay, right?
Mm. Well, from there is actually a really strange sound. I don't know if you can hear it.
I hear something like a distant wind.
Yeah, it's like I just shut one window. I'm really hoping that wasn't ruined. It's quieter now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll do
it
this
is
little symbol.
quieter now. Yes.
All right, we'll just have to deal with it. I'll just warn people when I type it if I can't fade it out.
I could hear
Sorry to
how
cut you off.
it was just a tiny background noise from here
Yep.
anyway. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I'm not sure if you know where you were just at. I apologize.
Yeah. So, and in those first few years, if all goes well, this organizing principle will be able to take hold and integrate my thinking, feeling, and my behaviors. So they will act as one. I will be able to act with integrity. I will be able to think something, have the appropriate feelings that go with that, and do what I think and feel. That's what I call integrity, is the
Yep.
integration of self. But
Yeah.
we all know people who their mind's all over the place, or their emotions are all over the place, or their behaviors betray them. They do stuff that they know is not good for them, let's say. That's one version of it, at least. People self-sabotage or whatever. I had a client here this week who talked like that. I know what's good for me, but I go home
Yeah.
and I drink or I, play with my phone until 11 o'clock, and then that sort of thing. So he doesn't have control of his behaviors in the way that he would like to. What what enables the mother to help you co-regulate to a point of self-regulation is if she is okay in herself.
Yeah.
Yeah. If she is not self-regulated, and that can look like postpartum depression, throws us
Mm.
off, right? We might still be might go back to work soon and be really anxious at work, about leaving our baby at home, what's going on. That my relationship might be tricky, my financial insecurity might be so in my face that I'm anxious all the time. That kind of anxiety then goes into forming the child's nervous system.
Yeah.
So the process towards self-regulation is not so smooth. They might not get to self-regulation, but we are going to grow up, right? Our brain is still going to form as an organ. Some parts of it might not connect very well, and my other physical organs are going to form. And I might have used this term before. The child who's growing up is still going to grow up, but rather than being gifted self-regulation, they're going to have to learn to manage their thoughts and their feelings and their behaviors, and that takes work and effort.
Does take a lot of
Yeah.
work.
And it taxes the person as well. And so, with this lack of an ability to incarnate your spirit or self, in my language, or to find that sort of cohesion, we will constantly be working to hold ourselves together.
Yeah, I know exactly what that feels like.
Yeah.
So when the mother or significant attachment person isn't regulated, and that can be anything from, like you said, anxiety, from depression or stress, right through. And Gabor Mate talks about it, like his parents were lovely and loving, but he was a baby of the Holocaust and his mother was really nervous,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so that affected him. and then he in turn has affected his children, and then as a group, they're working to repair that for their
Yeah.
future generations.
Yeah. And
And
you just described intergenerational trauma. So for people who think, what the hell is that people keep talking about? You just described it. I was the son of a World War One, a World War Two vet, and he was the son of a World War One vet. And males of my generation were not given any sort of emotional intelligence or permission to have
yeah,
emotions, in fact.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll get to this, and this is the whole point of this whole thing, is that we actually can learn those skills
Yes.
as an
Yes.
adult, and it becomes our responsibility, if we take it on, to not continue that damage.
Yeah.
Is there anything
So
else?
what I just described to you, that setting in which so keep in mind too that in our counseling practice, so trauma-informed counseling in its various guises is built into counseling trainings now like it wasn't 5 years ago and was almost non-existent 10 years ago, but we can't ignore it now. And we recognize, I certainly recognize the prevalence of developmental trauma amongst my client group. Like the vast majority of my clients have developmental trauma. And I would go so far as to say that if in adulthood we're still not managing our lives ourselves, the chances are, not 100%, but the chances are there's been developmental trauma that derails me in the various stages of my life.
I think that description you gave before of, it doesn't have to be intense child abuse. It can be this, what you just described, because so many people don't recognize that they've experienced trauma. And I think it's that unpacking of the various shapes that it takes for someone to go, well, I am actually still struggling as an adult. What happened?
Yeah,
So they can go, well, if you're struggling, you don't even need to know what happened. It's about going, well, I need to learn to regulate my nervous system and need to learn to, etc.
yeah. And that's something that, so the education, which is what well, it's what we're doing, but it's also what is necessary now for clients who come in, and they have high anxiety or things aren't going well, the relationships aren't going well. That's a path my thinking goes pretty quickly towards developmental trauma now for the reasons that I just said. So when I hear a few key things, and then I start asking questions.
Yeah.
And so the in Australia, the key website to understand, to get resources and statistics around developmental trauma, which is a form of complex trauma, which you mentioned earlier, is called Blue Knot, knot.org. And a Blue Knot would say 1/3 to a quarter of the adult population is affected by developmental trauma. I suspect that's actually a conservative figure in my
Oh,
mind.
me too. Me too. So I'll look at my other question, unless you wanted to maybe add to that. I'll say this and we'll make it fit together. From what you were talking about, these, I was going to say different parts of self, but the spirit, the self not being able to integrate properly. Part of what I was thinking was, I'll just look at my question. It's about how when you go through certain traumas, it's like you become fragmented. Like, and is this the stuff that you're just talking about? Is that how that fragment essentially happens? So, like, I have memories sitting up in the corner of the roof watching my body, and
Oh,
we don't
yeah.
need to talk about it heaps, but what I'm trying to sort of get at is eventually there are parts of self and we want to sort of we want to learn to integrate, we want to unburden them and integrate them and all that. So with what you were just saying, yeah, how does that work? Is that, am I getting it right in my brain?
Yeah. So I use the word integration instead of, I use the word disintegrated, like you're talking about fragmented, right?
Yep.
So yeah,
Disintegrated.
the parts of ourselves don't hold together. So that's very well formulated by you. I guess maybe you might upload or have in your resources the window of tolerance
Yes,
somewhere.
I've got it. Shall I show it quickly?
Sure.
I'm using new software, people, so Here we go. Screen. No, that's not the right one. Get there, nearly there. You can talk about it if you want.
Okay.
Here we go. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. It's the one that you can
Yeah.
you see it?
Yeah, I can see that. Okay. So I'll speak to that, shall I? Have we done that previously?
I don't think so. I think part of our confusion is this was the missing podcast and we're re-recording it.
Okay.
So we have talked
So
about it, but I lost it.
so I love that because well, I like visuals. They live with me. I have that. I teach trauma, so I have that, and I give it to my clients. I give it to them without I don't insist that my clients have developmental trauma, but this is a part of them thinking about, is that true of me? I also have a couple of videos that I'll send home links for them to watch and consider, is that true of me? Or what of that was true of me? So when we're in the state that we talked about, that fragmented or disintegrated or occasionally disintegrated, because already it sounds like we're describing being triggered, aren't we, with the word disintegration? Because we can roll along being pretty okay as long as we're not confronted with the things that trigger us. So now we're talking about the comfort zone, that rolling around, rolling on quite okay, because we're in our comfort zone. When something comes and smacks us in the head, so for the child, for example, who was unloved, their core belief might be that they're unlovable. And so when somebody shows, or I get the message that someone doesn't like me or doesn't approve of me, then I might get triggered by that. And rather than say, well, that's their problem, it actually affects me and it makes me feel anxious, and I might have various things that I do to go out of my way to try to make them like me, or pretend that they're not worthwhile and speak badly about them so other people don't like them. There's lots of different games we could probably map out that we play in those situations. And this isn't very large, I know, this window of tolerance, but in the green section on the left, that's what that says. The things that trigger me out of my comfort zone. Oh, there you go. Unconscious. Now I'm
Unconscious thought. Do you want me to read
anyway.
it?
Yeah, I'm triggered because my core beliefs or thoughts about myself are triggered. Trauma-related core beliefs about self are triggered. Well, there you go. So when that happens, then I will do I unconsciously, because my body takes over then, and that's where you want to read a book like The Body Keeps the Score. So I don't decide that that I'm going to be angry at that person who triggers me, because that is the fight response, my anger. I don't decide that I'm going to sort of, I don't know, go to another room for this party or whatever it might be, which might be the flight response. Or I don't decide whether I'm going to shut down and not numb myself to it, because that is the freeze response. There's also the fawn response, Faun, which is not in this model, but that means I go out of my way to be a sycophant, like you can see in America at the moment, depending on what time people see this, but there's a new president and everybody is, what's the word that might be? A sycophant trying to curry favors with him. That's the fawn response. And so
Yeah.
we go out of our way to please the other. So what you described up in the corner of your room is the freeze response, dissociation.
Yeah. So, and I've always explained it like I've slipped out.
Yeah,
What do you
that's
mean slipping? I'm
that's
like, I
what you do.
slipped out.
You slipped all the way out, but
Yeah.
one way or another, we can cloud our thinking or numb ourselves. So again, the body takes over for a child, which is what you're talking about. The body decides, can I fight here? No, I'm a child and that's an adult, whatever was going on, or that's a situation beyond my control. Can I get out of here? No, the window's 3 stories up, can't do that. Well, then my only recourse is to dissociate, numb
Yeah.
myself, so whatever's going on, I won't feel the blows or the abuse or whatever it might be. So that's an automatic response that the body makes. A lot of people as adults, so there's also single incident trauma, of course, as well.
Yeah, we've talked about that in another one.
Yeah, and people beat themselves up for not screaming, for not fighting back, if they're abused in some way as an adult, if they're raped or whatever it is. People give themselves a really hard time about that, but they don't make a conscious decision. It's a bodily survival decision that our nervous system makes.
Yeah.
And that's helpful for people to know. It's not their fault.
And that's the thing, like, I've written poetry about it. I'm just looking at my next question because I think I don't really need to ask it. And when I try to explain it to people and early in my trauma recovery journey, like when I got diagnosed, and like you think you can make a decision, as in, "Oh, I'm not gonna yell anymore, or I'm not gonna drink alcohol anymore." But then you just keep going and doing it. And you're like, "I made a decision," and it's like you've got no control. And then realizing, "Oh, okay, I actually need to do something about that and learn about it." And it took me a really, really long time to become so much more regulated that I can sit and think instead of just react,
Yeah.
you know?
So those 2 things you mentioned, the yelling, that's the fight response, and the drinking is most likely the numbing response, although it gives some people the courage to start yelling or fighting or whatever it might be. But I don't want people to think we only have one of those options available to us. At any given time, any of those options can be available to us. We're not either fight. Well, often I think people do specialize in one of those things. I was a very avoidant type for a long time, which is the flight response. I've lived in different
Mm,
countries and I still live, I live immediately on the other side of the world from where I started out, right? So I'm as far away as I could get. So, and maybe it's time to do I think you have Dan Siegel's, yeah,
yes, we can do that and then head back over to internal family systems for a little
yeah,
minute.
yeah,
Because I was thinking about how when we're getting triggered throughout childhood trauma or developmental trauma, that's a bit like what I was talking about with the parts getting sort of split off, and then we come to IFS land to bring them back together
yeah.
as
To
well.
reintegrate them through
Yeah.
strengthening the self. Do you want me to do this brain thing first because it kind of fits here and then go
Yep,
on to IFS?
that's fine with me. I'll show a picture of it, shall I?
Yeah. I don't know what you
Oh,
mean, but yeah, you go for it.
okay. You could talk about the hand fist model though. Do you wanna do it yourself,
Yeah, I'll
actually?
do this.
You
Yeah.
do that yourself. Yep.
I'll get the right angle for viewers. So this is a really good representation which Dan Siegel uses. He's an expert in the field. He's a great man to listen to. So this is the way that he educates people to understand this. That this is our primal brain or brain stem, located at the back of our neck, really, going into the brain. And that was the first part of us to evolve. And in our early evolution, it was all about survival. We needed strong instincts for danger. And so that's what the primal brain does for us still. We have evolved beyond that. We have emotional lives located in our middle brain, literally, physically located in our middle brain. It's called the limbic brain, and it's small compared to these other parts. But this limbic brain, that's our emotional wellness, really, our emotionability. That's not a word, but anyone can coin it now and take credit for it. And we have evolved further, and now we have the frontal cortex. So this is the way that those go together. By the way, I find it interesting. We usually talk now about the prefrontal cortex. I might have said this before because I said it somewhere recently, that Dan Siegel says now neuroscience is narrowing in right here. There's
To the
an
finger.
intense levels of neural activity right here. And that interests me because I'm very interested in the mystical tradition, and they talk about the third eye right here.
Interesting. Yep.
Yeah, I find that interesting. Because eventually spirituality and science will come together. I think the more science evolves, the more the claims of mystics of the past are actually affirmed. But people, that's a particular interest of mine. However, so what happens when we're young and our brain is still forming, if we're in a situation where our survival is not clear to us? What we need is predictability, security, and if we don't have that, we become vigilant about our environment. Our safety becomes our priority. And this part of our brain diverts our growth, our fullness of growth anyway, from this. We will all have an emotional life, but for some, it will be more stunted than others. And then this, which is I didn't say, it's our rational center. They call it our executive functioning here. So when people in the midst of crisis can't be rational, so crisis counseling, which is what I learned 100 years ago in university, when people are in crisis, which means when this is firing, right? We're in fear mode, we're triggered, and what we need to do is to find mobility in our thinking and stability in our feelings before you
Yep.
can work with somebody who's in crisis. So neither of those things are in charge, right? We can't bring our frontal cortex to bear, and we can't find our emotional stability when we're triggered.
Absolutely. That comes back to the window of tolerance as well, is when you learn to become aware, you might be able to get yourself out of a situation to limit harm to self or others. There's not really heaps you can do, but I know that I've started I'm more able to recognize that I'm triggered now. Like,
Yeah.
when I was younger, I had a psychologist I've probably told the story before. He's like, "Oh, why don't you put a card in your purse, and then when you get triggered, you'll be able to pull it out." And I'm thinking, "Aren't you a trauma specialist? Don't you know that's impossible? That's an impossible task. I'm not gonna remember that at all because my brain doesn't actually work, and I've turned into a reptile." But, like, whereas I could I would only recognize that I was triggered when I was coming out of the trigger. So I'd do something like sit on the couch for 2 days and watch a show, and then I'd go to my partner, "I think I've been triggered." And he's like, "Yeah, I was thinking that too, because 'cause you've been on the couch for 2 days in the dark." And I was like, "Damn." I just lost 2 days. Whereas now I can actually feel, because 'cause I've been doing somatic work with Irene Lyon, it's like I can feel the cortisol filling up my body now. So something will happen, and then it's like my legs start to get heavy, and I'm like, "The cortisol's filling me up. I need to get on my air bike," or something. I know that sounds crazy, but anyway,
No, it
it's
doesn't sound
taken me
crazy.
years
And
to get there.
yeah, we
Yeah.
haven't talked about cortisol, but the cortisol is the drug, I guess the natural body's drug for keeping us alert, really. So when we're confronted with a dangerous, where we feel unsafe, adrenaline kicks in, and adrenaline in the animal kingdom and also in us is meant for a short-term fix, and
Yeah.
then when we're then safe, it'll level back out again. In a person who's been traumatized, they lose the ability to regulate that rush of adrenaline, but the adrenaline can't be maintained, but cortisol takes its place. Cortisol kicks in. I'm not sure if I've got that exactly right, but I think that's,
I think you're right. I'm just making a note to make some content on that later because there's a lot of health costs on that,
oh
especially
yeah,
as your adrenals fatigue from constantly pumping out adrenaline and then go, "Okay, well, now we're going on to cortisol." And then what happens is it goes on to the sex hormones, and that's when people start to get really, really sick.
right. The
Yeah.
the whole autonomic nervous system is affected by cortisol. So that
Yeah.
has, first of all, to do with digestion. So we can feel the twisting of the gut or whatever, or irritable bowel syndrome, or things like Crohn's disease. Those are all effects, or can be, probably there are probably other ways, but those are effects of cortisol over time.
Yeah, yeah. And that's
Yeah.
what I've been learning. I'll have a look at my question. I don't know if you had anything else to say on that. We've done that thing where we get lost because we're having a great chat, which is
Yeah, and I
fantastic.
think we've talked about that before, and people like Irene Lyon, and there's some free videos on YouTube
Oh,
from
sure.
Irene Lyon. Yeah, and they're very good information. So there's two different aspects really. Irene Lyon is really good with the medical stuff, as is, if we've put Nadine Burke-Harris up, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She gives a brilliant TED talk on childhood trauma and the adverse childhood experiences
Yep.
business behind that. But they're very much medical. They're concerned, they come out of a medical background, and they're concerned. Well, I'm not sure Irene Lyon does. She was a therapist. But they can say things like how our body is eroded over time. What are the
Yeah.
signs? We're more prone to things like diabetes and anyway, even some
Yeah.
cancer.
I'm definitely gonna do a separate video on that because there's so much in it, and I've learned so much from her.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do ultimately is to prevent that from happening, and that's why it's important to go to ask the question, "Is that me? Do I have trauma?"
Yeah.
Because if we don't actually look at it and then do the work, we can become really, really sick. And not only that, we impact those around us with our trauma.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this essentially.
Yeah.
If we
And
go on.
I was just going to say, so when we're talking about co-regulation and self-regulation, the thing to always have in mind is getting back to self-regulation. And for many of us, we will co-regulate. We will have our close friends or partner with whom we feel we're not being judged, they're there for us, they're open, they're listening, and so on. That's co-regulation. We still do it as adults. Yeah, so through co-regulation, we can get back sometimes quickly or sometimes over a period of time to self-regulation when we're all right again.
And sometimes my dog helps me with that because I live by myself.
Yeah, yeah,
So we were just talking about, I'll just circle back, make sure we've done everything. We were just talking about the brain and how that contributes to when we get triggered, we can't access that front part. We're here in the reactive. Um, and I think that leads to is partly that internal family systems stuff, is that what happens is my understanding, and you can banter with me or follow what I'm saying in a second. For someone like me who grew up with a lot of trauma, so I kept getting hurt and triggered and dissociated as I was growing up. And then it's like if anyone's seen Harry Potter, the mission over the series from some point is they're trying to piece together this Horcrux, and they have all these different pieces. And then once all the pieces get put together, that's where the power is. And I kind of see that myself. Like I've got these little parts of me that sort of broke off and got put away in a corner because she got so hurt. And then we have the managers and protectors coming in going, don't hurt her. We're gonna protect by dissociating. We're gonna protect by XYZ. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, we started off by talking about the spirit and the self, and so I think I don't know how to. You might be able to just take over in a second. How does this bit happen where we go, okay, there's these things that happen, these injuries that disintegrate the self, and then I don't know.
yeah. So internal family systems talk about parts of us that go into exile. So the exiles in us. And so you're perhaps, your vulnerable child has gone into exile. I guess. I don't know if you would describe it that way, but so I can describe it that way. When I say men of my generation weren't allowed to have emotion, but we do have, of course, we all have emotions, right? We're all whole beings in the final analysis, but our emotional selves had to go into exile. So most men, I've run many men's weekends, and men's healing comes from being able to cry. Huge healing when you sit in a circle of men and have real conversation and men cry, because literally we there was kind of this cliche, men don't cry, real men
Yep.
don't cry.
Yeah.
Boys don't cry. Even if you're a 6-year-old boy, you weren't allowed to cry. In fact, you might get a clip over the ears if you were thinking of crying, um, which toughens you up, but in the long run, there's a whole part of yourself that goes into exile. So family systems works with reclaiming those parts of ourselves that have gone into exile.
I'll pop up a picture while you're talking. I'll pop up a picture while you're talking. That's all right. I like it. You go, sorry.
No, so in therapy, we look to understand how we operate. So there are parts of us that are called managers. So there are also parts of us, in fact, in internal family systems, everything comes in parts. They're all parts. I don't know what this says, so I'll speak, that might contradict me, but I'll just speak to what I know.
No. What I'll do is I'll provide it as a resource after and just turn it off, because it's good to look at it, go, well, there's the self, and what I like about it is the bottom is the exiles. It's like they're pushed aside, and the managers and firefighters are sort of in
Yeah.
front, and we want
Yeah.
to be able to get to the core self. So I'm going to provide those later as a
Yeah.
resource.
So the managers are the parts of us that are productive. They lead us into the future. And so for me, let's say me who was unlovable, that's my core belief about myself. What I had to do was to learn to be liked. So I got the feedback from my outer environment to the best that I could. It's a very shallow sort of way of coping. These are adaptive mechanisms that we do. So I could convince myself that people liked me, but if there was a sign that people didn't like me, that made me very anxious, right? So, but that ability to be liked, to be socialized, was a very important accomplishment of my, a part of me that I would now call a manager, right? I'm very well adjusted socially. So that's a management part of myself. I'm conscientious, I'm responsible. I'm basically lazy, but also a hard worker. I'm always prepared, I'm always early, those things that make me an asset in the workplace as well. They're all functions of parts of me that manage my life, but they're all adaptive mechanisms, because they're all like, if I fail to be on time, if I'm going to be late for something, even still at the ripe old age of 118, I'm anxious sitting in my
Yeah.
car thinking I might be 5 minutes late.
Yeah, it's stressful.
I'm much better than I used to be. But I would have shown up with sweaty palms and a sweaty forehead at one point, just from being 5 minutes late. And of course, half of the population is 5 minutes late anyway, so why worry? But that's the rational part of me that has no bearing on my anxiety about being late. And then there's the firefighters who go into panic mode and cope as best as they can. So that might mean like a fist flying out at somebody else, but it's more likely to mean, with most of my clients, a bottle of wine, and if that's not enough, another bottle of wine. The things that we do that are dysfunctional, that don't help in terms of our overall well-being, but we do them anyway to avoid going to that quiet inner place, which is what all people with trauma seek to avoid. Because if it gets quiet enough and inner enough, we might tap into the desolation, the emptiness, the tears of exiled parts of us.
Yeah.
Now, the beauty of internal family systems, what makes it work. So you can do that, what I just talked about, you can do that through wounded child work, right? That's what, the inner child has been geared towards. Where internal family systems differs is that I, as the IFS, that's how the acronym, as an IFS practitioner, I will lead you to a description of these dysfunctional parts of yourself, and I will ask you to speak to that part of yourself or that part of yourself. And by doing that, like I could talk to, so I could say, let me talk to that, part of yourself that is so busy. You wear
Mhm.
yourself out on behalf of others all the time, and there's no time for you. I could say, can I speak to that part? But what I'm doing then is bypassing you. So what we want to do continually in internal family systems is strengthen the self so that by the time that busy, busy, busy part of yourself could potentially be integrated, what it needs is the confidence that you're strong enough to incorporate it and do its job for it so it doesn't have to do that job anymore. And
Yes.
literally set up a conversation where you can I can handle this in one way or another. I can handle this. And do you think that you could just step aside and observe
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
while, and see how I go? Yeah.
And it's building trust with your parts by even, like, the little daily actions of like, for me, that's making sure that I train or walk or move in some capacity. It's connecting with my parts, it's being still, it's doing the meditation that I'm about to talk about with you to strengthen the self. And I think that's a good lead in, like, you can add to that, of course, if you like, but to psychosynthesis, because I know that is that more of your background?
That's my background. In fact, I haven't trained. I've done small workshops in IFS, so I have a working knowledge, but it came quite naturally to me because I have a background in psychosynthesis, which I haven't trained in that either, but I used to teach it when I worked at UniSA, so I had to get around it, right? You don't want to be teaching master students something you're not around. Well, that's a
No.
part of what I just described about me being prepared. So, internal family systems is very similar. It describes things differently. It talks about the word that it would use for the parts of us is subpersonalities. It has a model whereby in psychosynthesis there is what's called a personal self. So that's me when I'm focused. The way we're talking about self, when I'm sort of focused, I can be in the flow. When my thinking, feeling, and behaviors are all congruent and integrated, I'm sitting in my personal self. And that personal self in the psychosynthesis model, which I like it because it does have an overt spiritual aspect, that part of me is connected. It goes through my higher unconscious to connect with
Mm.
my transpersonal self. And that takes us into the realm of spirituality and mysticism, that we have a divine nature, and we are here to work on things to advance our development, to heal things from the past. So the word karma would be used in Eastern religions for that. And that's what, again, that's the framework in which I feel comfortable in saying everything is purposeful because we have
Mhm.
karma as well as what we're here to do in this lifetime. We're here to heal karma, but we put ourselves in situations where we develop for the future as well. So that's what I call destiny, for lack of a better word.
Do you think that not only are we as a soul, I was lose my confidence, are here to evolve ourselves and develop ourselves, but also our contribution to the planet and the Earth's evolution?
Yeah,
Yeah, because I feel like I won't go on about it today, but the things that are going on in my life and where I've evolved to at this point, it was like I always knew this one piece of the puzzle, but I was like, but how do I get there?
yeah,
I can't do anything with this. I could
yeah,
see that there was potential gold for me and others in it, but I couldn't get to it. And then something happened, and then everything opened up, and now I can see the path much more
right,
clearly. But it's certainly not just for me,
yeah.
you know?
So there's a school of thought that we call that world karma, that we also carry world karma. And so the healing of the planet or social justice might be, if it's not about the individual, it might be about bringing a greater awareness of justice to the world. So that's kind of beyond my ability to see or experience.
That excites me though.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more we age and mature, I think the more reserves for that kind of thinking are available to us.
So to wrap up, like we've made a meditation. We've made 3 versions of it. It's already on Spotify and places like that. What I wanted to finish with is an actionable step as what can we do? Like if you've stayed this far as a listener, it's like, well, what do I do with that? How do I strengthen myself, my true self? Like I like the idea of that. I want to strengthen my true self and be less triggery.
Yeah.
And Garry introduced me to this meditation a few years ago, and when he told me that it was designed to strengthen my true self, I was like ran at it like a bull at a game. Like I'm doing it every day, and it actually really helped me a lot. It really centered me and helped me with my clarity. So what I wanted to ask you, Garry, and I'm kind of glad that I'm not keeping jumping over to my Word doc, but it makes me slightly anxious.
Yeah.
Is
Because you
could
got to
you
get it right.
explain? My psychologist might have said that also. Explain perhaps the origin of the meditation and the intention of it, like why does that
When you
one.
say the meditation, I know the big meditation, the longer one is a psychosynthesis, embellished a little bit by me, and there are different parts of it. So I carried it on by adding other meditations to a core meditation, let's say. So the one you're
Well,
mainly referring to, I think, is creating the throne room in the depths of you.
yeah, and the higher self comes and touches you on the shoulder?
Yeah, that's right. Or whatever your conception is of something greater than
Yeah,
you.
yeah, you explain that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's explained in that. And then, there's also a meditation whereby you can sit in a garden. So in that one that we embellished or that I embellished, the door's open and there's a garden of your own, right? It's perfectly safe. And that's where you can put thoughts out and in the stillness of a meditation, see what comes back to you.
Mm.
And then there's the path that leads down into the valley where there's a mountain and you can have your goals at the top of the mountain. Climb the mountain step by step and see what comes towards you because those are the things trying to thwart you from achieving your goals. And in that meditation is they can't block your way, but you can observe the kind of things that try to cross your path. So those are helpful meditations, and like you, they were very helpful for me at one stage, as was just visualization, I must say. When I was young, there was a thing, it's still a thing actually, called silver mind control. This was in the
Yeah, I've come across
1970s.
it, yeah.
And so surrounding yourself, seeing yourself in a bubble of white light, that's a way back to self-regulation rather than a meditation. But that's kind of what we're talking about. When we get ousted from our window of tolerance, what do we do? Actually, what we didn't look at is that on the right-hand side of that diagram, there's a list of things which, given the profundity of being triggered, seem like small things, I must say. But what's necessary is to reconnect with our body and our bodily senses. And so, we're talking about grounding and mindfulness or sucking from a straw because it draws us back inwards. There's actually quite a long list. I don't know if I've given you the longer list. I used to work with children with disabilities, and we used to wrap them in blankets when they needed that extra comfort. Strangely enough, on that list of things that I now work with. So there's a number of things, but the idea is, as I encourage my clients, do you have a favorite music list, a soothing music list? I
Mm.
know you would say, and I agree with you, depending on your level of being triggered, the last thing you might think of is where's my music list? But there are times that you might think of where's my music list?
Well, part of that is that daily practice. It's like I
Yes.
heard this. There was a lady, she was involved in the army in America and training soldiers to prevent post traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And she was saying, like, no one will just go and run a marathon without training, right? And
Yes.
so when we get triggered or we get attacked, that's the marathon. So you train for it every day.
Yeah,
And
good.
when you train for it every day, you can then access it when
Yeah,
you need it.
yeah,
So my psychologist said to me the other week, because I said, "Oh, I know that when I'm triggered, I shouldn't lie on the floor with my dog. I should get on my air bike." And she's like, "Don't beat yourself up. Just go open a window and sit at, you know." But what she actually said though about the air bike is she said, if you can actually just get on that bike for 1 or 2 minutes each day, then you'll get yourself thinking that that's a possibility, that you might be able to do that when you feel like you need to mobilize out of freeze.
That's good.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
good.
and she's like, "And also, if you need to lie on the floor with your dog for 2 months right now, that's actually okay." And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah,
Like, that permission was really beautiful to receive.
yeah,
But my point is, doing a meditation like the ones that we've provided online, like if you do my thinking for people, because they get longer, is there's a half-hour one, and to spend some time doing that, and then you'll start to be able to you describe it at the start of the meditation. You'll be able to start just going and sitting in your throne room at will.
yeah,
And I remember you saying to me, I saw someone else do it the other day when they went like this to center themselves, and they were like, and I
yeah,
was like, "Oh, you're heading to your throne room."
yeah,
So the more you practice it, the more you can head to your throne room and be in that sanctuary and connect with your higher self. And also one more thing about that, I have a lot of trouble going to the dentist.
yeah.
And I was almost they were actually saying, "Do you wanna tap out?" Like, there was 3 of them doing something, and I was just really, really overwhelmed. And I had one of those things clipped on with the flappy bit, and I'm trying to deep breathe, and the flappy bit was suffocating me, and I just was terrified. And I was going through my toolbox going, "Okay, deep breathe and hold and breathe out slowly." And I was like, "No, no, don't breathe. There's something gonna block your nose." I ended up going so I was visibly distressed, and they were checking if I wanted to stop the process. I'd already had the anesthesia. I'd already all this stuff had happened. And I was like, "I do not want to stop the process because I'm gonna have to come back." And I did that. I went to my throne room, and my higher self did that, and my whole body just relaxed, like, I just went, and then that was it. They could just do what they wanted to me. And it was, a really powerful experience because the only reason I could access it was because I practiced it. So, yeah.
And so, just for people, this bears saying, so just bear with me while I say it.
Yes, I will be
But the
quick.
idea about the window of tolerance is not that we should find our way back to this narrow comfort zone. At that time when you're triggered and spun out, yes, you want to get back in there. But in our day to day, we want to broaden our capacity for the things that come towards us. So we want to live on the edges of our comfort zone and widen them so we're less triggered. And that means taking risks occasionally.
Yeah.
You know, that if, for example, being disliked is something that triggers me, which it's not anymore. But you know, I need to find a way if I get the messages in my day to day that someone doesn't like me, or if I haven't done well, or that didn't go very well, I need to be learn to be okay with that. And that's when I might breathe deeply. That's all I really have to do now is breathe deeply, but I might have to center myself, maybe even in my throne room, whatever it might look like. But the idea, I might have mentioned this before, but when we're talking about it's the self again, right? It's the self-regulation we're talking about. The self regulates us. So we're constantly talking about strengthening the self. And one way to do that is to involve yourself in activities that require thought and emotions, something that you really care about anyway, and behaviors. So I worked with a really good example of this is a girl I worked with during COVID. I never met her because it was during COVID, and I did this with her, Zoomed with her. But she was in a different state, and they were confined to their home, and she was triggered a lot during confinement because she had a younger sibling. And I said, when you get triggered, you know, what do you do? She said, I go to my room. I said, what do you do there? She said, I either play music. She doesn't mean listen to music. There was a couple of instruments she played, or I draw or paint.
Yep.
And that was perfect. Her intuition took her to do something that required focus here, and the doing of it. So
So
that's
that's thoughts, emotion, and body. Is that what you said?
action. Yeah.
Action. And that's I remember we had a conversation a while ago, and I think there were 2 things because I teach pole dance, and you were saying that you thought that that actually probably really helped me. I think you said something like, you're probably okay because you did that." Because it's not a mindless thing, like, to me, even running, like, you've gotta have some awareness, but that involves a lot of thinking. It involves some passion and really deep body work. So you were saying that when you're triggered, that's activities that involve thoughts, emotion, and action help you.
Yes, they do help you. As I say, she instinctively did that. To have the wherewithal to do that in the midst of being,
Yeah,
big T triggered anyway, might be difficult for people. Breathing is the first. I'm sure we discussed this before, but the first thing is the breath. I think we do that almost instinctively as well. Certainly with our children, we say, "Let's take a breath, count to 10," that sort of thing. So they know whether their knee is actually sore just because they've tumbled. Yeah,
yeah,
and so the sip, sip, sigh is the latest,
yeah.
a double inhale of breath and a long exhale, because they soothe the nerve that regulates the autonomic nervous system. It's called the vagus nerve, if you see that, or the polyvagal nerve, if you see that in writing somewhere. But it's and
There are
people,
so many things.
yeah, people get a lot. That particular breathing tends to be successful, where sometimes the other things like box breathing don't necessarily work for people. Yeah,
Yeah,
anyway,
for
that's
me,
go
few
on.
takeaways. Oh,
Yeah,
no, no,
yeah. No, we've been going for, I think, close to an hour and a half, so
just over an hour.
interrupting me is probably a good thing.
Well, the main thing that was to finish on was to make sure that we talked about why the meditation matters and why it's helpful.
So
Can I
so
I'll
can I
just
just sorry,
yeah.
there I go again, right? So
Mm,
so there are counterindications around meditation because, as I said before, the last thing people with internal exiles want is that quiet inner space to be opened up, unprepared. So Zen meditation, which is the common meditation where people try to clear their mind, makes you susceptible to that. So that in itself can cause panic, which is why we have all those other mechanisms going on in us. But mindfulness is different from that. So I say that because even though the meditations we have that you've uploaded are our meditations, they're guided meditations, so they're
yeah,
more like mindfulness because we're paying attention to
yeah.
somebody else's voice.
And it's like you're doing without doing. You're not your brain is active, but what you're doing is focusing on a certain part of your inner world, and it's not free to roam everywhere else. It's not gonna
Exactly.
open up some other baggage that you're not willing to see yet. What I was going to ask is how as a last and final question, how maybe you've touched on this, if you have, I apologize. The particular meditation, how does it work for strengthening yourself? Like, why
Well,
does it work?
anything that you do, so that meditation itself talks about us being that we are beings of consciousness and will. So my consciousness is as close as I come to exercising my spirit. And my will is the actual exercising of the spirit, that I can move my will around without doing anything except using my consciousness. So when I can go from so now imagine that there's a stairway in front of you. You're using your consciousness and you're doing something with it. So that is strengthening yourself.
Yeah. I get it, because 'cause you're deliberately bringing awareness to those levels of your being.
And so generally when we talk about awareness and will, we're talking about it on a soul level, that my thinking is my awareness and my will is my doing. But they're also those are reflections of my spirit, which is also a body of consciousness and will, but on a different level. So Jung talked about imagination. He really emphasized that. He talked about it as the language of the soul, but it is the language of the spirit, in fact, because he didn't talk about spirit, he talked about soul.
Mm.
My inspiration, I suppose, for the language that I use and the concepts that I have are in part psychosynthesis, which really pulled it together for me in the realm of therapy. But Rudolf Steiner's work really clarified a lot of those concepts for me, and they fit for me. I don't just dogmatically believe them. They
Mm.
I understand and they fit for me.
Well, we probably shouldn't unpack Steiner today.
No.
We should probably wrap it up. Thank you, Gary, for joining me today. And I think that our series is almost complete. So I look forward to sharing it.
Wow. Well done you for persevering through all of this, and it's been a pleasure for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All the best.